Volcanic eruption or major earthquake early warnings could be given by NASA satellites. As we know, we've had major earthquakes in the United States these past few days. 5.7 out of nowhere that hit Salt Lake City, Utah. And then we had a 5 magnitude quake out of nowhere that hit northwest Texas. And then the 6.5 that hit 190 miles west of Yellowstone National Park in Idaho at the Sawtooth Fault, which is capable of giving 7.5 magnitude earthquakes. We had landslides there. Of course, it was intense. It was felt 500 miles away. And of course, it encompasses not only up to Manitoba, and Yellowstone, of course, was jolted, but it could, the radius would definitely take in all of Los Angeles. But let's take a look at what the National Park Service says concerning what happened in Hebgen Lake 60 years ago in Yellowstone.
But just before midnight on August 17, 1959, one of nature's most terrifying forces was unleashed in this narrow canyon. An earthquake, measuring 7.5 on the Richter scale, jolted the ground. At the time, it was the fourth strongest quake ever recorded in the United States. This computer animation shows the sequence of events that happened under the cover of darkness. First, at the epicenter of the quake, the Red Canyon and Hebgen Lake fault lines cracked and dropped 20 feet or more. 3 giant scarps ripped through the Madison River Canyon. Within seconds, the earthquake dealt its most damaging blow. Just at the point where the canyon drops into the plains, a massive block of canyon wall sheared off and slid with astonishing speed and force into the Madison River and halfway up the opposite canyon wall. The section of rock, 3/4 mile wide, hit the river like a platter, dropping into a pan of water. The landslide displaced water in every direction. Instantly, the slide dammed the river, and water began to build up behind the slide, forming Earthquake Lake. At the same time this was happening, upstream another disaster was in the making. Hebgen Lake, created in 1915 when the Hebgen Dam was built, was sloshing over its banks like water in a pail. When the north side of the lake dropped some 20 feet, huge waves called seiches were formed. They overtopped the dam, washing into the river downstream.
Now, even though they have found a lot of interesting things having to do with the mantle plumes of magma in the United States, especially the West Coast and the Baja mantle plume that splits into a Y, the western part, going and feeding the San Andreas and Walker Lane fault system, which has the high threat volcanoes of California, and the eastern branch going through Utah and into Yellowstone, and is very close to the surface there in that area. And that's the area where we're having our earthquakes in Utah, and they're still ongoing. We still have a lot of wonderful technology that the geologists are using with the help of satellites. And this could be the way they have early warning of volcanic eruptions, volcanic activity, and earthquake activity. So NASA has developed a new radar that will help monitor earthquakes and volcanoes from space. And that could give an early warning of potential devastation. It's with NASA's new CubeSat imaging radar for Earth sciences, or CIRES for short, CIRES. It could potentially save, of course, millions of lives in the future by helping geologists pinpoint where the dangers could be. The series of small satellites will examine impacts from volcanic activity, earthquakes, and changes in land surface, that is the deformations, of course, or stress building up, and they'll be able to see this from space and could majorly influence policymakers, of course. The information made available will help experts during times of crisis by looking at where disaster relief is best designated. Lauren Y., the principal investigator who led the recently concluded instruments developed by SRI International in Menlo Park, California says, the CubeSat imaging radar for Earth Sciences, or CIRES for short, can help decision makers and emergency managers obtain observations sooner after a hazard event so that they're better prepared to deal with disaster relief. Analysis could also help locate where and when a volcano might erupt. Before a volcanic eruption, what happens to the ground as it moves? The ground tends to bulge slightly as magma builds beneath the surface. The acute observations by CIRES could detect these changes in the ground formation, and it would then, of course, signal that an eruption could be on its way. Kyle Anderson, geophysicist at U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, said volcanoes will often inflate with magma before they erupt. Although it's difficult to predict, he says, how big or how long the eruption will be, we can say this volcano started inflating and there's a higher probability of it erupting. CIRES is equipped with S-band interferometric synthetic aperture radar, INSAR for short, and that allows it to detect changes in ground formation through even the thickest vegetation. It's a tool which could be extremely useful. So it basically looks at the bare earth. Mr. Anderson said INSAR has been particularly useful for better understanding volcanoes in remote areas. Patrick Renick in the CIRES Signal Processing and Experiment Design head said that the INSAR allows you to get wide areas of coverage and see how one part of the volcano's caldera is changing relative to another part. That's what we saw, for example, in Mount St. Helens before the eruption. There was a bulge under one part of the volcano, and that's the part that erupted and sloughed off. Now, CIRES should be able to cover the entire caldera. NASA said in a statement that the S-band radar is able to penetrate through vegetation and reach the ground. That's wonderful. Now, CIRES takes 2 radar images of an area from approximately the same position in space at 2 different times, and then processes the 2 images to determine if there's a difference in the deformation. The S-band radar is able to penetrate through vegetation to reach the ground to do this. CIRES takes 2 radar images of a specific area from approximately the same position in space 2 different times, processing the images and concluding if there is any type of a difference. Now, we do have, as we know, world's most dangerous volcanoes. We know that Yellowstone, for example, which is, of course, it was rattled, it was shaken by not only the Utah earthquake, but also the Idaho earthquake, which was even stronger, 6.5. The Utah was magnitude 5.7. And of course, we were told that the Idaho craters of the moon would be most probably the next volcano to erupt in Idaho, which is, that position is about 190 miles west of Yellowstone. And the Sawtooth Fault, which is old, it's about 15,000 years old, and they recently found it in about 2010. They found that it could give 7.5 magnitude. It can generate 7.5 magnitude earthquakes. They are far and few between, but they can give potentially large earthquakes. Not that it's imminent. It could happen, from what the geologist said from a past video we just uploaded today, in an hour or in 1,000 years from now. But it did shake Yellowstone. This is the craters of the moon area that you can see that fantastic, beautiful, pristine black lava flow. So that area has had 60 lava flows recently. Not recently, but in the past couple of thousand years. But anyway, the most dangerous volcanoes, Yellowstone is the 2nd largest supervolcano in the world. And we also have the most dangerous volcanoes being the Navarupta volcano in the U.S. in Alaska, Mount St. Helens, of course, Mount Rainier in the U.S., Mount Vesuvius is in Italy, Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines, Mount Merapi, Indonesia, Mount Agung in Indonesia, and Mount Fuji in Japan. And this, of course, is from Express UK by Sean Martin. And that's great news because at least now they can have some type of way to view the deformation. Thank you for your support. Please be very careful and take care of yourselves. God bless you. Thank you. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.